Okay, I think they're ready to start. They're saying
Okay,
that
go
they're.
ahead and start up. All right. Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. I want to welcome everyone to the fifth annual Austin Citywide Iftar presented by Emgage, Texas. My name is Imad Ahmed, and I'm a national board member of Emgage. This annual tradition has been an opportunity for the Austin Muslim community, to share the spirit, values, and celebration of the holy month of Ramadan with the broader Austin community. In past years, Austin Muslims have had the honor to break bread with our non-Muslim neighbors and community leaders. Given the current extraordinary circumstances, such a physical gathering was not possible this year. However, I'm thrilled that we can continue the tradition virtually this year. We are fortunate to have with us an amazing panel of speakers that you see around me. Mayor Steve Adler, Representative John Bucy, Mayor Sadaf Jaffer. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. Let me first run through today's agenda and a few housekeeping items. I'll start out with a few comments about Emgage and the work that we're doing in this community. Then we'll have each of our three esteemed speakers share a few prepared remarks. Finally, we'll have around 20 minutes of Q&A with the panelists. I know you all have Ramadan feast to prepare, so we'll try to end promptly at 7:30. For those of you on the Zoom call, we'll be allowing people to submit questions via Facebook Live. Therefore, we'd encourage everyone to be on Facebook Live, and you should see the link to Facebook Live shortly in the chat box if you are on Zoom. All questions submitted will be routed to our moderator team, and I'll ask as many of the questions to the panelists as time permits. Now, many of you may not be familiar with Emgage, the nonprofit that's behind this event. The primary theme of the Austin Citywide Iftar has always been civic engagement, and that's exactly what Emgage promotes within the Muslim community. Emgage is a national Muslim advocacy organization that focuses on voter education, get out the vote efforts, emerging leader development, candidate endorsements, and issue advocacy. The Texas chapter has been around for over 10 years, and we have a presence in Houston, Dallas, and Austin. The Austin team, which puts on the Austin Citywide Iftar, was the first organization to actively lobby at the Texas Capitol exclusively on behalf of Texas Muslims. This issue advocacy work is critical, particularly in Texas. A recent University of California at Berkeley study showed that over the past 10 years, Texas has unfortunately led the nation in Islamophobic legislation introduced. Without a champion for Muslims at the state capitol, these unfortunate trends will continue. During the 2019 Texas legislative session, Emgage worked with several coalition partners to help defeat bills like SB 9, which would have curtailed the voting rights of Texans, and SB 17, which could have enabled discrimination against minorities. Our team had over 40 meetings with legislative offices during the session, and we were able to pass 2 resolutions honoring Texas Muslims. One resolution, HR 1481, honored the great efforts of the Islamic Society of Greater Houston to help the victims of Hurricane Harvey. The other resolution, HR 1564, celebrated the reopening of the Victoria Islamic Center after an act of arson destroyed the center. Our work here in Austin has just started. This year and next year will be particularly critical years. In November, we face one of the most important elections of our lifetime. Our team is working hard to vet the candidates, endorse the ones who support our community, and ensure that we get the largest Muslim turnout Texas has ever seen. We're also preparing for the 2021 legislative session. With one session under our belt and stronger relationships with our elected officials, we expect to have many more wins for Texan Muslims. Last but not least, we're working to ensure that every Texan Muslim fills out the 2020 census form at www.my2020census.gov. You should see the link in the comments shortly. Our community's participation is crucial if we want our fair share of government resources and representation over the next decade. Our team is passionate about this work and dedicated, but we can't do it alone. Your assistance, particularly financial assistance, is paramount to our success. Please consider making a contribution at emgagetexas.com. Again, you'll see that link in the chat shortly if you'd like to contribute. Now, without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to our first speaker, Mayor Steve Adler. Mayor Adler is the 52nd mayor of Austin and really needs no introduction. He's been a great friend of the Muslim community in Austin, and we've been very honored and excited to have him speak at every single Austin citywide Iftar since 2016. Mayor Adler, the floor is yours.
Imad, thank you. Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. One of the most greatest privileges that I've had in my time as mayor is to have been part of this community-wide Iftar in each of its years. And I think, given the introduction from Imad, it's important to touch on how this citywide Iftar happened in our community. 5 years ago, there was a young student, Muslim American, who was waiting in line to get seated at a restaurant in town, and was horribly, verbally accosted by someone who was there in a restaurant where no one came to her aid or assistance. Not a good moment for our community, not representative of who we were. But I had the opportunity to sit with a group of young Muslim Americans to talk about what would be a real constructive act in response to that kind of behavior. And the birth of the citywide Iftar, someday to grow into one larger than the one in Houston, became the goal. And I have no doubt but that we'll get there. This is an important month, and it's an important month to reflect upon others and not ourselves. And I think the birth of this community effort points to that. It becomes particularly timely as we're going through the pandemic, we're going through the community now, because we see that same kind of isolated but still hateful behavior, first directed toward Asian Americans in our community, especially Chinese, as this pandemic was starting. We see it now rearing its ugly head, directed toward Hispanics in our community, as the number of Hispanics in our community are being targeted by this horrible virus. It is more important than ever that none of us sit silently by while this hatred that really knows no particular peoples join together to make sure that hatred is stopped wherever we find it. You know, during this month, it's important that we rise above all of these things, and that we really focus on one another, and we focus on what is important. You know, during this month, Muslims fast, feel the hunger pains, recognize that their physical being is something that is temporal, but their spiritual beings go well beyond that. But also reflecting on the opportunities that they have, recognizing that there are many people that don't feel those same hunger pains associated with the fast because they don't have enough to eat year round. During this time, when so many of us are staying at home as part of the stay at home and work safe, our world has really changed. And in some respects, the entire community has now the opportunity to go through the same kind of introspection, the same kind of charitable thoughts, the same kind of activities that are usually devoted to this month. I want to express personal thanks that this event is happening remotely. That is a very selfless way to celebrate and to recognize this holiday. We've gone through a month where an entire community has stayed at home and disrupted their lives, both economically and otherwise, in what is the largest act of selflessness by a community that I have ever seen. We continue to do that as a community when we venture out and maintain social distancing, and when we go out and make sure that we're still wearing face coverings in our community. It is the embodiment in terms of selfless behavior, in terms of the charitable work that is Ramadan. And in so many ways, I feel closer to this event this year than in past years because of the experience that we're all going through together. It is an absolute privilege to be invited to participate once again in this community-wide Iftar and to really feel in a very personal way much of what I've heard talked about at these events through the years. So thank you. And again, Ramadan Mubarak. And I just want to close by saying that I miss my friend Sheikh Umar. Blessed be his memory. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Adler. We really appreciate you attending this event for the past 5 years and your consistent support for the awesome Muslim community. And thank you for the kind words about Sheikh Omar as well. We all within the community miss him very much. Our next speaker is Representative John Busey. Representative Busey is a Texas State Representative who represents District 136, which includes Northwest Austin, Cedar Park, Leander, and the Brushy Creek area. Representative Busey was a partner of Emgage during the 2019 legislative session and was honored by his peers as the House Democratic Caucus Freshman of the Year. We're thrilled to have him join our lineup. Representative Busey, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Ahmad. I'm gonna wish everyone a good evening and thank you for allowing me to join all of you tonight. It's an honor to share the stage with our mayor, Steve Adler, who has really stared political challenges in the face over the last few weeks, and he's continued to stand up for doing what's right for all of our well-being. So we appreciate your hard work, and it's an honor to get to meet Mayor Jaffer out of New Jersey, who I'm sure you're having such similar challenges, and also having opposition maybe at times where people make politics out of emergency situation. And so to see y'all strength and courage is really inspiring to us and to the community. Emgage, thank you for this opportunity. You know, as was talked about, we convene in such an unusual time and unusual circumstances, but it's so good to be among people who are joining together to build each other up and doing that in a safe way where we're bringing our community together while staying physically separated. In times of crisis, the building blocks of our society, the common threads that bind us together, from fostering community to voting and civic engagement, become even more important. We are at our best when we enable everyone to fully participate in shaping our collective future, intentional in inclusivity and proactive in problem solving. I was asked to talk a little bit about civic engagement and the reopening of Texas. You know, former President Lyndon Baines Johnson taught us that the vote is the most powerful instrument ever devised by man for breaking down injustice. However, unfortunately, instead of making it easier to vote, so often in Texas, our statewide leaders have fought for policies that make it harder for all of us to engage in our right to the ballot box. This last legislative session, serving on the elections committee, we had to spend so much of our time not fighting for ways to make it helpful for all of you, but stopping bad bills, as was mentioned in the introduction. Senate Bill 9 this last session would have criminalized making a simple mistake on your voter registration form. And it would have made it illegal, just one example, for you and two friends to take a taxi cab to go to a voting spot together. This bill was a blatant attempt at voter suppression, and its intent was to make you fear the act of voting. But with your help, the help of Emgage, and so many people that are gathering with us tonight, and many other organizations, we were able to kill this bad bill. It's because you engaged along with so many others that this bill was stopped. If it had gone forward, it would have put yet another hurdle to so many people having access to the ballot box. Now we find ourselves just 1 year later being challenged yet again with unnecessary obstacles intended to make it harder for each of us to vote. Without a doubt, as we navigate the public health and economic crisis due to COVID-19, we must find a path forward for elections and civic engagement. Government can't plan for everything or every crisis from a policymaking perspective. But now that we do know more about what we are dealing with, it's important to act proactively and decisively. We can't be another Wisconsin where we saw people stand in line for hours to vote amongst a pandemic, many of whom caught the virus because of it. Texas can do better, and Texas must do better as our elections approach this summer and again in November. We have to protect your right to vote and also allow you to protect your right to health. That's why I'm fighting for the governor to grant the right to all Texans to be able to vote by mail. You should have the option to vote in person or vote by mail during a pandemic. Many states are making this choice to do so, but Texas tends to far too often stand in the way of voting rights. We should not ask Texans to jeopardize their health in order to cast their ballot. We need everyone to reach out to the governor's office. And as you stood up during last legislative session to stop hurdles for the right to the ballot box, we're asking you to stand up again and reach out to the governor and reach out to your state elected officials and demand your right to vote in a safe way. Demand that the expansion of vote by mail is given to all eligible voters this cycle in Texas. And demand that we take federal money that is available to us to ensure that all of our in-person voting is also as safe as possible. The end goal here is for every Texas voter to be able to fully participate in their democracy safely while having full confidence in the integrity of our electoral system. Another critical thing that we must do, and we can do it right now online, as you heard at the beginning, is if you have not yet filled out the census, we need you to do so. Without the heavy door-to-door canvassing component that we usually have, we have to lean on our community groups and on our neighbors and each and every one of us to make sure we get a complete count. Texas stands to lose $300 million each year for the next 10 years if even just 1% of our state's population is undercounted. That's $3 billion in federal funding that could go to our public schools, to increase access to healthcare, towards our roads and addressing traffic gridlock, and our critical infrastructure, among many other services. Together, we cannot let this happen, so we must all do our part to make sure we're counted in the census. I believe that a healthy and vibrant democracy with an informed and engaged electorate is paramount to our mutual success as a people. We will only solve these problems that we're facing in Texas and our local communities if we work together. Many of the problems that have been more exposed and exasperated by COVID-19. We must bring people to the table to find innovative solutions and a path forward that combines the best of our ideas and aspires to the best of our ideals. That's what this night is about. As Mayor Adler talked about, this is about having a dark day in our city's history and having to bring us all together to think about who we are as a shared people and who we want to be. As we look to reopen Texas, we need to make decisions based on facts and not fear, free from partisan and political influence, with the sole goal of the health and safety of our community. We must listen to and trust medical experts and get them the supplies they need to continue to save lives. Our progress is on the line, but our future is worth fighting for, and we can succeed by working together. With just a few closing remarks, I want to start by thanking you again for the invitation to speak to all of you. And I want to let you know I'm a new father. Today is the 15-week birthday for my baby girl. It's my wife's and I's first child. And when I think about what we're doing here and why we participate in government, I think about the Texas I want my daughter to grow up in. I see a Texas with good schools, economic opportunity, and access to healthcare. I see a Texas where immigrants are welcome and we celebrate how our lives are enriched by diversity and inclusion. I see a Texas where we put a new emphasis on civic engagement and a government that works for all of us. I see a Texas where we live up to our potential, where we go out of our way to help one another, where we embrace the humanity of those who may not agree with us, and where we push past the cynicism and tired thinking that stands in the way of achieving the Texas promise for all of us. Friends, if we stay engaged together, we can build our community up and make Texas a state that leads the way for the nation. Again, thank you so much for this opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Representative Busey. We really appreciate all of your support for our community and really appreciate a lot of the work you're doing on initiatives like the ballot by mail initiative, and appreciate your willingness to partner with Emgage on SB 9 during the 2019 legislative session. Congratulations again for being a new father.
Thank you. I look forward to working with y'all next session as well.
Our final speaker is Mayor Sadaf Jaffer. Mayor Jaffer is the mayor of Montgomery Township in New Jersey. She's the first woman of South Asian descent to serve as a mayor in New Jersey, and she is the first Muslim woman to serve as a mayor in the United States. She's an inspiration to all of us, and we are very lucky to have her join us. Mayor Jaffer, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you to Emgage, and wonderful to hear the really meaningful remarks from Mayor Adler and from Representative Bucy. What seems of most interest to people is that I'm the first South Asian woman to serve as a mayor in New Jersey and the first Muslim woman to serve as the mayor of a municipality in the United States. At the start of all this, when I first thought about running for office, I didn't set out to be the first of anything. I simply decided that it was important for people like myself who believed in the primacy of human rights and diplomacy, who thought that we all should have equity and access to the resources that we need, that people like that should be the decision makers rather than only being advocates to the decision makers. Growing up in Chicago as part of a Muslim family and community, my religious upbringing helped me think deeply about issues of injustice in the world and committing myself to be someone who would try to work for positive change. My family was well informed about politics. We listened to NPR in the car, and my dad used to hold mock presidential debates between my brother and myself to keep himself entertained on long car rides. I'm lucky that my parents took us on many travels, including to visit family in Pakistan and Yemen. These experiences taught me that life could be very different if I had grown up somewhere else. And this perspective is a strength that immigrants often bring to broader American society. I decided to pursue an undergraduate degree in international relations and then a PhD in South Asian and Islamic studies because I wanted to be able to teach and conduct research that would build bridges of understanding. Electoral politics hadn't really been on my radar until towards the end of my PhD program, when I started thinking about how it was important to be that decision maker. And I believe that this is particularly important for scholars who work on Islam because of the skewed understanding of Islam that sometimes guides policy towards Muslims and Muslim communities. I was elected to my town's local government, the Township Committee, in 2017. In 2018, my party won 2 more seats and took over the majority. I was sworn in as mayor in January of 2019. Part of my reason for pursuing elected office was that I wanted people in my circles, whether academics, women, Muslims, South Asians, to know that running for office is an option for them. I also wanted to highlight that in both my academic and scholarly experiences, formal training and networking programs have been essential. And I'm so thankful to the work that Emgage does to have that sort of programming for people. For my part, I've worked with a group of women in New Jersey to establish a nonprofit called ISAW, Inspiring South Asian American Women, to get more South Asian American women involved and interested in public service. This doesn't mean that there aren't challenges. Though many people point to my example as the first Muslim woman mayor as one of hope about opportunities in our political system, I've also been harassed by people who hate and fear Muslims. I implore my fellow Americans and indeed people throughout the world, to embrace their Muslim neighbors as complex individuals with layered and distinct identities. In order for this to happen, social media platforms, political leaders, and journalists need to reorient the conversation around Muslims. And I think events like the one tonight are part of that process. I'm often asked whether my academic research has a direct impact on my governmental service. In a general sense, having a background in research makes it more likely that I would be able to provide evidence-based solutions for my community. But I also have examples where my research on Islam and Muslim communities has been directly relevant. During the first few months I served on the Township Committee, there was an anti-Muslim bias crime where pork was left on a Muslim family's car. The response of the mayor at the time was relatively weak. He said, "Well, you can't fix stupid, and unless it happens again, we don't really know the motivation." I insisted that the crime be taken seriously and provided research about how pork is used to target Muslims and how Islamophobia is a type of racism. I also started a discussion group called Montgomery Mosaic, which is affiliated with the national Not in Our Town movement. We meet monthly to discuss topics like anti-Black racism, anti-Latinx violence, and growing anti-Semitism in our country. We've made sure to host events at all of our local community centers. The first two were held at a local synagogue. The second two were at a Protestant church, then a Catholic church. And we've also hosted an interfaith prayer service last year, an Iftar, that saw over 150 attendees. And to my knowledge, that's the first time there had been an Iftar in our town because there isn't a mosque in our town. So it was held at a church and it was really a wonderful event. And it's my hope that these efforts, informed by my religious studies background, will help to do part of the work of healing some of our frayed and fraying social fabric. In the context of the COVID-19 crisis, our township was very proactive in shutting things down early. I believe that my experience in having lived in various countries and looking at the lessons of history provided a helpful perspective. And again, I say that because I want immigrant communities to know the value that they bring, and that perspective being very important. At this point, our schools and non-essential businesses are closed. We've had 98 positive cases and 5 fatalities. And we've tried to be as transparent and communicative with the residents as we possibly can. I've been focused on trying to make sure that we have PPE to reach our senior centers, that the food pantries are stocked, and that we're supporting our small businesses as much as possible. My advice to those of you joining this evening are that I would challenge you to think about solidarity. Most of us have heard Martin Luther King Jr.'s words, quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." In my organizing, I've learned an inversion of this saying that, quote, "Justice anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere." No effort is too small, and indeed every major accomplishment has happened because of the seemingly small struggles of many. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Jaffer. You're truly an inspiration for many young Muslims that are looking to get involved in politics and run for office. We really enjoyed hearing your story there. We appreciate the inspirational words from all 3 of our speakers. And now we'll turn to the Q&A. For any audience members with a question, please submit your question as a Facebook comment and specify which panelist it is directed at. We'll take a look at the questions and select as many as time permits to pose to our panelists. And just a note, Representative Busey has a prior engagement and will have to step away in about 5 to 10 minutes. So if you have a question for him, please type it in sooner than later. Right, and looks like we already have a few questions here. First question we've got is for Representative Busey, and that is, how can the Texas Muslim community most effectively have their voices heard at the state legislature?
Sure, thank you. There's so many facets to this. One is making sure your voice is heard at the ballot box first. I think that is so important. When we're not right at election season, you can be working for candidates that you believe in, engaging in them, making sure that it amplifies your shared message and goals in the Capitol. The other thing you can do, and it's more challenging amid the pandemic, but reach out to your elected officials and start building a relationship with them now. Elected officials will do meetings over Zoom right now. You can talk to their staff and get to know people in their office. Those people have such an influence over our day-to-day operations and preparing us for legislation and how we're going to vote. So building relationships and taking the time to get to know your rep and their staff is important. Participating in the census is important because we just need that kind of civic engagement right now, so that it'll better our entire state. But we need to hear from you, and we need you to demand a seat at the table. I think so often people get told to wait their turn, and I think nobody has to wait their turn, and nobody has to be pushed out. The table can get bigger, so let's have more people come and join in, and let's all share our ideas. That's what I was talking about earlier, is we need to take everyone's ideas and build a better community together. So I think building a relationship with your elected official in their office is paramount. Participating with candidates that share your shared values and making sure they get elected is important. And then when we get back to session, being engaged with legislation, and not the day that we're taking a vote, but throughout the entire legislative process, being down there talking to us about why you support or why you oppose legislation matters. And I think one-on-one personal stories can make a difference with an elected official. So come share your stories.
That makes a lot of sense. That's a lot of the types of things that we're trying to do, ways in which we're trying to get the Muslim community engaged here at Emgage.
Absolutely.
The next question is for Mayor Adler. And this is really what's on everyone's minds right now, given the current pandemic. And the question is, how has the COVID-19 response experience been? Talk about the dynamics in working with the state government apparatus. What are your thoughts on the latest orders from Governor Abbott about reopening Texas?
Let me answer that question, but first let me say how impressed I am with our visiting mayor from New Jersey, just up the road from my alma mater and teaching there now. Thank you for being with us, and Representative Busey, even just in such an early career, one of my heroes at the state legislature. You're doing an incredible job so quickly. So thank you on behalf of the entire community. Our communications with the state leadership is not always easy here in Austin, because we lead with progressive and inclusive and supportive policies that don't always gain the same favor at the state level. The governor has issued his new orders, and I think that they're being misunderstood in part because of the way they were communicated. The governor has maintained his stay-at-home provisions, the ones that say we should avoid being out in groups. That's his overriding umbrella for his orders. He continues to say that people should wear masks. He continues to say that you should only be with your household group, with some exceptions, but they are only exceptions. The essential businesses, the reopened businesses, those are exceptions. The county orders and my order track that. I don't want people to lose sight of the overarching place we are in, because this virus is no less infectious today as it was a month ago. I am concerned that the governor has reopened things as quickly as he has. Our community really could have used another week or two to get more testing and more tracing in place. I'm concerned that the messaging coming from the governor's office is focusing more on what is being reopened and less on what we need to do in order to be able to make the reopening successful. I am going to try and do everything in my power to make the governor's plan be successful. That's why I am so insistent on people wearing face coverings. You know, face coverings is an incredibly selfless act. You don't put on a face covering to protect yourself. You put a face covering on to protect the people around you. So anyone who's going into a grocery store or anywhere else, you put a face covering on to help the clerk or the cashier, to help protect their health and their lives. Now, the governor has made it so that we can't enforce face coverings with a criminal penalty or a civil penalty, but he didn't say we couldn't make it mandatory. So we're continuing to keep it mandatory. And the penalty now is that if you don't wear a face covering, more people are going to get sick and some of them will die. And that should be penalty enough. We are going to do everything we can to be guided by the science and the data and the physicians. And we are going to do everything we can to protect our community. And ultimately, our community gets to decide what we do. The governor can say things are open, but he can't make us all go. So we get to decide as a community if we're going to take this slowly. And thus far, the overwhelming number of our community are. And I hope people continue to do that until we start seeing the numbers come back so we know where we are and what we need to do.
Thank you. Have you seen any initial numbers in terms of infections going up since the opening, or any changes in the trend?
This is what makes this very difficult, because there's a 2-week lag from the time that you change policies till you'll actually see people get infected. So what we're seeing today is the result of the policies that were in place 2 weeks ago. And 2 weeks ago was just before we had the governor change his policies. But if you recall, 2 weeks ago were some days with some pretty nice weather. So we are seeing right now some early signs of increased hospitalizations in our city. The numbers are very early. It's too early to draw a conclusion, but there are a lot of yellow flags being waved. And that's just from the good weather that came before the governor changed the policy. So I have a lot of concern. But one of the things that we learned and earned from the 6 weeks when our community did so well in shutting things down is that we have now honed our models to be really specific to our community, not generalized models. And we know that we will get enough notice to be able to turn it down again if that's what we need to do to be able to avoid a spike in our hospitals that will overwhelm them. So it is in that knowledge that I take some measure of peace and comfort, but it's got to take our community responding when and if we say we've hit the trigger. Sometime in the next few days, we're going to be very public with what those triggers are. I think there'll be other cities doing the same thing. I hope that our governor, who said he'll be guided by the science, will also embrace the concept of recognizing triggers that would indicate to us that we have to throttle back or throttle off. And that's what we're paying our attention to now.
Thank you, Mayor Adler. Representative Busey, I know you have to step off in a minute. Any final comments?
Just, I really appreciate this opportunity to share the virtual stage with all of you. Thank you for that. And let me know and our office know how we can help and continue to work together as we did last session. We just want to make a stronger relationship during this interim and as we move forward, not just to fight bad legislation, but let's work together on legislation that makes our community stronger. So we look forward to y'all's ideas and your help and your input and to being a strong ally with each and every one of you. So thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Take care. Be safe.
The next question is for Mayor Sadaf. As the first, Mayor Jaffer, as the first Muslim woman mayor and the first South Asian woman mayor, you've certainly been an inspiration to many of us. How has the experience been? What advice would you give Muslim women interested in pursuing a political career?
Well, I would say that keep in mind that women win elections at the same rate as men. They just don't run as often. So stepping up and running is a really great decision to make in a lot of ways if you want to see that change. And that's really what motivated me, that if I was kind of horrified that we're 75th in the world in terms of women's representation in politics, then rather than expecting another woman to step up, I should step up. And so I would say really think about running for office. And there's so many different ways that you can do that, whether it's in your school board or your local government. So get involved, find out what the positions are, start volunteering, for local boards and commissions on one of your interests, whether it's environmental issues or community building efforts. There's basically so many different ways to serve. And I would say that, there are difficulties. There are difficulties that face women in politics. There are difficulties that face minorities in politics. And if you're a woman and a minority, you kind of face both of them at the same time. So I won't say that it's always easy. And I definitely have my days where I get down with some of the attacks that I get that are not deserved and really just based on my identity. But we have to change the vision of what leadership is. We have to have that representation so that people get more comfortable. People will only get more comfortable if they see it more often. And the funny thing is, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and at one point I was discussing with her, well, maybe, Mom, you won't be a mayor at some point, and maybe this other person will be a mayor. And she started laughing. She's like, Kim, mayor's a girl's job. So, I mean, it's, that's, kids have to grow up seeing that, and then it becomes normal. If they never see it, then it's abnormal. And, I definitely have attended events for elected officials where someone has asked me if I was just the date of someone else. And I'm like, no, actually I'm the mayor of my town. So, there are highs and lows. There are good points. I definitely, I just didn't expect, because I was so focused on the local, I wasn't thinking about the impact that it was going to have outside of my town. But it's really been powerful to see the love from the Muslim community, the South Asian community, and it makes me feel like stronger in that I'm doing this for my community too. And definitely happy to help anyone who wants to talk to me, who's interested in getting involved in politics, and seeing what advice I have. But I would say seek out formal training and mentorship programs, because they really help those from minoritized communities, because we might not have that built-in network of, our dad have been the mayor when we were growing up, or our mom have been on school board when we were growing up. So seek out those programs. I'm happy to talk to anyone, and know that your voice is needed, and that your community will be better because of your service.
Thank you. Yes, all the struggles that you've gone through, I think, are really going to pave the way for the next generation, for people like your daughter that are, looking to follow in your path. So I appreciate all the, all the struggles that you've gone through, and I know our audience really, finds it very inspirational. The next question is for Mayor Adler, and it is, how should the Muslim community continue to stay engaged and active during the pandemic, especially in light of 2020 being an election year? Do you have any thoughts on how to politically organize amidst social distancing?
I think that everyone is trying to figure out the answer to that question right now. Necessity is the mother of invention, I think. There are so many ways to organize now. In fact, in some ways, because people can't rely on the easier methods, perhaps, of just calling a meeting or calling a rally, people are having to be more creative. There are more Zoom meetings, more Facebook meetings, more Cisco meetings, more Teams meetings. There's so many technologies now that will bring people together. And I think in a lot of ways, we're finding that these new communications enable us to draw greater personal connections than we were able to draw before. The ability to have a meeting like this where people can post questions and you can ask them. My 5th Iftar, I've spoken 5 times the very first time. I've been able to hear questions from people and respond to them. And I think that it's going to take creative minds and innovative minds to really take a look at the new tools that we have, and to employ them. But one thing for sure, the stakes have never been higher in these elections that are coming up and the elections as we head into November. There have never been issues that have been more contrasted. There are going to be more people that vote here in Central Texas in this next election than have ever voted before. The turnout will be higher in this election than it has ever been before. There'll be more people voting in this election that are voting for the first time in an election. So there is great need for people to be organizing and communicating. I know that the organizations, the candidates are investing a lot more resources now in being able to reach people when they're online. More money being spent on those resources than on TV commercials than in the past, relatively speaking. You're going to see more pop-ups and more messages that find their way to you on the internet. So the need to organize and to reach out and to communicate has never been greater, and the new tools have never been more available.
Great, thank you.
The mayor also has an answer to that question.
I just have a brief addition that, we were hearing about how important it is to vote. And I would say, put your primary election in your calendar, put the general election in your calendar, and decide if you're going to try to vote by mail or what your process is going to be, and learn about all the candidates and vote for every office on the ballot and educate yourself. If everyone's at home, or most people are at home, take this time to prepare to be an educated voter and to make a commitment to vote early and often in every election that you qualify for, because it is so important and we really need to make a habit of it. And that's your voice. So I would say focus on voting and encourage your family members and your community members as well. We all can, complain on social media or whatnot, but that's just really venting. To some degree it's educational, but it's mostly venting. So vote and contact your elected officials through official channels, send them emails, call into their town halls, go, attend their Zoom town meetings and things like that. That would really make a contribution to making your voice be heard and hopefully impacting policy.
And probably one of the most important things to do would be, as you've already heard, and I'll just add my voice to it, is to go online and get counted in the census. There are some communities that easily go online and they get overcounted. And there are some communities, especially minority communities, that are always undercounted. If we want to make sure that everyone has political power equal to their numbers, the first thing everybody should be doing is making sure that they've gone online to get counted, and everybody they know goes online to get counted.
No, it makes sense. I think that's great advice. The next question is from Mayor Jaffer. So you spoke during your comments about the fact that your town has obviously been hit by the pandemic worse than a lot of other parts of the country. And so the question is, how is Montgomery Township in New Jersey addressing the pandemic? How are you balancing the shelter at home versus economic issues or the opening up of the economy?
Well, I would say that it just so happens that the epicenter of the impact of the pandemic in the United States is New York City. And obviously New Jersey and New York are completely intertwined in terms of people's lives and their work. And so, New Jersey is the second hardest hit state. But the leadership of our governor has been really strong, and we've been following that lead of the stay-at-home orders and the closing of non-essential businesses, the closing of schools. It is very important that we have economic health, but we need to have, public health, and then we can have economic health. If everyone is sick, then our economy won't be strong either, because no one will be able to go to work, no one will be able to shop or things of that nature. So we have to prioritize health and those frontline workers who, you know, reside in all of our communities who aren't able to stay at home. So I would say that as we're waiting to see a decline in infections, we're still focusing on keeping everyone at home, having the masking be a priority. And then we are shifting to thinking about, as we get more access to tests, we're just starting in New Jersey to do testings of asymptomatic people, which is a very important step. And the more widespread testing we can have, the better picture that we'll really have about the real rate of infection. And then also increasing the number of contact tracers who will be able to trace those people who have been infected and keep those people at home so that everyone can go out. I mean, part of the issue, as you know, many people know, was that we didn't have sufficient testing for quite some time, and we still don't. And if we had, you know, enough tests to test everyone, then we might not have had to take these same steps that we've had to take. But that being said, you know, we've convened our meetings with our small businesses on how to support them, how to be creative by providing meals for medical workers from local restaurants and things of that nature, where there's sort of a symbiotic thing going on. And, you know, as Mayor Adler said, being creative in solutions, like, okay, how can we do businesses where there's curbside pickup? How can we do businesses with delivery when, you know, before there was no such thing at those businesses? So being creative, being open-minded, always looking for feedback from residents and community members and business leaders. That balance is there, but I feel a very strong sense of responsibility for the health of the community. And it's really heartbreaking news to be that person who hears about the death in town first. And I take that responsibility as something that I need to prioritize and make sure that we're doing all we can to protect the health of our residents and community members.
Thank you. The next question here we've got is from Mayor Adler. And it's a question about the mail-in ballots. What are your thoughts about this? And what's Austin doing to promote mail-in ballots?
I believe that we should have mail-in ballots for all elections, regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not. I think we should be doing everything within our power to make it as easy for everyone to be able to vote. I think that's especially true when you have a pandemic. It is horrible policy, I think, to require people to have to gather in crowds in order to be able to exercise their constitutional right to be able to vote. So I was very supportive of the local judge that found that here in our area, people can ask for a mail-in ballot based on the health consideration associated with not wanting to put themselves at risk for a very infectious disease that passes from person to person. And that ruling made absolute sense. I am incredibly disappointed with the reaction from the Attorney General, who is seeming to threaten people that would follow a decision by a district judge in our community. You know, the judges are the people that speak. And if that's going to be overturned, it can be overturned on appeal. It's been appealed, but until it gets appealed, it's the law in our area. So it doesn't surprise me that over 14,000 people have asked for mail-in ballots. I hope that the law stays that way with that determination. Quite frankly, I think that a decision otherwise would be an affirmative decision to try to limit the number of people that vote. And that's just not right.
Thank you, Mayor Adler. Complete agreement on that. We've got time for one more question here, and it's for Mayor Jaffer. Being a Muslim in politics, I think the presidential election is on a lot of people's minds, and it's a question related to that. A good number of Muslims supported Bernie Sanders, who has now suspended his campaign and endorsed Joe Biden. Some Muslims have become disengaged. How important is it for the Muslim community to stay engaged despite his campaign suspension?
Absolutely. All right. So I speak as a Bernie babe, as my husband called me. So I also was supporting Bernie Sanders for president before he had endorsed Joe Biden. But I want everyone to keep in mind that politics is the art of the possible. You cannot have an option that's not on the table. You can only select from the options that are on the table. And I understand the disappointment. And I understand why so many Muslims were attached to Bernie Sanders, because he acknowledged our community in a way that not many politicians have for a very long time. And I know that I personally felt very touched that he came and he spoke at ISNA, which is probably the biggest, Muslim community conference in the country. I felt like very seen. And so I know the pain of not having that candidate that so many people, knocked on thousands of doors and donated so much time to. But as I said, you have your options and you have to choose from them. And I would say get more involved, get involved with your local parties, run for office, try to become a delegate to your county or your state or the DNC or whatever party you belong to's conference. But don't be disillusioned. I think that, let's see, being disillusioned is sort of a privilege because it means that it's not a life or death issue for you. But politics is a life or death issue for many people. And we're seeing that right before our very eyes with more than 78,000 Americans having died from this pandemic so far. So please don't be disengaged. Do what you can. I know how hard it is and it can be painful. And I've had my disappointments and moments of feeling like, how does anything even function this way? But we have a lot more power than we think we do if we get engaged, if we demand more from our elected officials, if we become elected officials ourselves. So I would say keep the hope alive, and let's keep trying. And people have been through so much. I mean, we can look through the history, American history, or our histories of whether it's colonization or other things that our people have gone through in various parts of the world. And they've come through it. And we are the testament to that, those of us who are alive today. So let's honor their sacrifice and all of their activism and do something for future generations.
I think that's great advice, Mayor Jaffer, especially coming from a Bernie babe like yourself. Thank you so much. We're getting close to 7:30 now, and we want to be mindful of our panelists and our participants' time. So that concludes the Q&A portion of this program. Before we conclude this event, I'd like to offer some reminders to all of the attendees. First of all, get registered to vote ASAP. Look out for voter guides and endorsements that Emgage will be sending out to Texas Muslims. Most importantly, vote on Tuesday, November 3rd. Texas is looking more and more like a swing state, and Muslim participation can make a critical difference in ensuring that we have good leadership in place. Number 2, follow us on social media so you can help us engage with legislators leading up to and during the 2021 legislative session that starts this January. You can like the Facebook page you are on now and follow the Twitter handle @EmgageAction. We expect to be fighting to protect voting rights and fighting anti-discrimination legislation again, and need your support to make sure that the voice of Texas Muslims is heard in Austin. We'll go ahead and post in the comments section the Twitter handle @EmgageAction. Last but not least, all of this work occurs only with your support. So please, as I mentioned earlier in the program, support the crucial work that the Emgage Texas team is doing by volunteering or making a donation at www.emgagetexas.com. You will see links in the comments shortly to our volunteer page as well as our donation page. In closing, I want to thank all three panelists for their time and inspiring words. I'm so glad that we were able to come together as a community and continue this tradition despite the extraordinary circumstances. That's all we have today. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. Ramadan Mubarak to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Imad. Thank you, Mayor.